Welcome everyone, Nick Ottinger here once again. This week, a nice new layout for COTA, or in other words, Circuit of the Americas as they formerly call it. But this week in Xfinity, we have another road course that's going to be a little bit challenging for just because of a new section. And with that said, what I'm going to do in this video is just going to explain some of my key factors I look for in attacking the corner, balancing the car, how to really maximize the whole angle of the corner, getting into the corner, and maximizing the apex angle. So what I'm going to do here, just the first couple laps, I'm going to let this play for 2 laps in a row in cockpit view. And then at the end, once I get my lap 9 or 10 that I've recorded for you guys here, I'll let that play through chase perspective as well. So with that said, just going to have this roll through, let you guys just see, on just what the car looks like in cockpit view and driver perspective. So with that said, I'm going to let it roll. While the second lap's going here, as you guys can see, we had the new section that we're going to be approaching here after the S's. And it's just a big focal point to realize in that section is just not to overdrive the left-hand section right here. Get the car slow enough. So it's a pretty flowing corner, but it's also a sharp radius to go into that kink that we just went through. So what I'm going to be doing after this, this lap finishes is just dissecting, each corner for you guys what I'm looking for, and really trying to maximize our approach to what we need to get out of the car. This is a tough combination, so there's so many unique corners, and you really feel like you got to actually start cutting the corner earlier, when in reality you just need to worry about how you're progressing and slowing the car down, and then focusing on when you're timing your throttle input. Carry some momentum through the corner. Alright, once we get to turn 1 here into the braking zone, I'm going to actually slow it down, give you some points what I'm looking for, and different ways you can actually attack the uphill section. So at this point, you guys do not need to shift up to 4th. The gear's meant to completely stay in 3rd gear, so you don't have to have an additional upshift, for a little bit of, hundredths of timing while you're going uphill, but also so you're not having to add another downshift in some compromising areas where the rear of the car is pitching up and the front of the car is pitching down to the asphalt. And, so just something to think about. So that's why I've geared it just to have only third gear be your tallest gear that you're going to get here. So with that said, uphill, this is going to be a good marker here. I'm going to do it slow-mo. Pit exit wall we just passed right now, like we're right at the end of it in this visual. And here, once I slow down, I'm braking before, if you guys have this graphical, avenue as well, this actual dirt is what it is on the racetrack, is almost parallel to the exact like pole as the grandstands are on the outside right here, if you can see my mouse. So with that said, as you can see, I'm braking well before that. And that's to make sure I'm getting to my braking zone as straight as possible when I do my downshifts. And once I get up to the crest of this hill, I can start releasing that brake pedal almost fully if I actually match my entry speed. So with that said, I'm going to do this slow, straight line braking as much as possible. You can see I don't have as much wheel input, maximizing my heavy braking zone. And once I get to the crest here, now I'm downshifting the first, and I'm releasing that brake pedal enough. Now, this is a slow section of the track, obviously. It's only hairpin we really have, considering we are not running the full layout, the Grand Prix layout. So, more wheel input, I'm getting off the brake, and I'm finding my apex right there. This is probably the hardest part for creating launch off of turn one. You could hug the center, the apex out, or you can let it wash out here. But it's really all contingent on how you're getting off the brake and when you're timing your initial throttle input. You can see how much wheel I got to the left, partial throttle. I really want to open the wheel up before I start increasing to a heavier rate of throttle. Now I'm still in first gear. Go to second. Now this little small short chute between turns 1 and 2, I'm a driver who likes shifting the third before we get down, turning fully to the right near my max wheel inputs into turn 2. And why that's important is I don't want to be upshifting the second, having to add an extra, or upshifting from second and add an extra upshift and timing. And really, it doesn't help me process the next phase of going into turn 3. That's as simple as I can put it. And plus, it's just easier to keep some rear tire life and not carrying too much speed into here. And then if you're not managing your partial throttle, it's something that's a little hard to actually dissect. So up to third, staying in third, and now partial throttle once I'm actually starting to turn left. And that's key because I want to make sure I'm not overloading with too much wheel input to the left while I'm lifting off the throttle. In other words, where I sit the car onto the front of the splitter and when I'm actually lifting off the throttle. I'm going a little bit of brake pressure, braking as straight as I can, and making sure my objective is to get as close to this yellow curbing without hitting it. Now this lap, very, very close to hitting it. This left edge of the splitter, if you hit it, you're just going to be bouncing. You're going to be bouncing off of it. So get as close as you can to it, braking as straight as possible before you add more wheel input to the right. Getting off the brake, closer I get to this curbing. That's your objective. Partial throttle to carry some more momentum. And if you just feel better completely staying off the gas in this section, just do what's comfortable. We got to make sure we hit the right line and we're carrying our ebb and flow of the corner and maximizing our momentum. Here you can see, I'll rewind this a little bit, directional change, not even in any braking phase here. That's because I did not overspeed entry. Now I'm in a partial throttle, still partial throttle, straighten the wheel up. And now, if you guys read the notes, once I actually get the right rear near this curbing, I'm setting up for my turn 6 entry, and that's still a new phase. But I'm also lifting completely by the time I get the right front off this curbing. Why that's important is I need to make sure I'm not carrying too much entry speed in this section, like we were talking about a couple minutes ago. And with that, straight line braking as much as possible, but if I add more wheel input to the left, I don't want to just add resistance to where the front's not turning. I want to make sure it's capable, and the potential of the front tires is keeping me turning. So with that, just getting off the brake, and by the time I actually hit the curbing, I'm going to be in the throttle just a little bit because it's a momentum corner. You know, we got a lot of runoff here, but do not use all this runoff. Why that is important is if you're going to use all this runoff, you're delaying the moment you need to get to your maximum throttle usage. Basically, you're just adding extra distance before you can actually start making more lap time. More throttle input, more you can actually make lap time. So partial throttle, getting the front to cut, and by the time I'm actually angling this for a straight entry into this kink, this section's really tight, you know, and bumpy. You know, you don't have room for two cars. You can actually cut the left hand a little bit if you want to straighten this part of when you're landing down after this curbing. You can do that as well. But it's just a quality to remember. You don't want to put the right front tire or right rear tire entering right here. Really important to clip this curbing with the right edge of the tire, at least hitting the curbing itself, so you're not getting off track. Now I'm off the brake, and I'm going to rewind this once again. Just going to go slow here, and you can see, just trying to make sure I'm not hitting the splitter too hard. And once I land, I have to subconsciously, we have to make sure we're actually cutting to the apex of this corner. And this is a corner we can actually cut quite heavily. The right front will have to be on this white line. You can even clip some of the outer edge of the right front on this curbing, but you got to time the exact moment to get as far left as possible without getting a 1X. So going to be carrying some brake, and the more wheel input I add, obviously, again, going to get off the brake, partial throttle, and going to open the exit up and utilize some partial throttle and full throttle. The longer we have, you know, in laps, you know, the rear is just going to have some security issues. It's going to get greasy. And this is one area that's actually going to get greasy because of that quality of you need to actually generate more throttle to make lap time. So with that also said, we have a braking zone that is further now than if we had the long straight. And this 100 meter mark, or this second white line, and I'll also reference this is the second to last white line on this green turf, okay? That is where we're going to be lifting and also braking. Brake as straight as possible, and you're going to actually downshift the first after you cross this. I'll rewind it again. After you cross this white line, but remember, you're also going to turn in just gradually, just where you're not just sharpening your angle of the wheel input and going to this curbing too early. But you want to make sure you're doing all that after this white line. That's your 50 meter mark. Once I actually do my downshift from second to first here, and now I'm going to start adding my, you know, wheel input, starting to get off this brake pressure a little bit. And you can tell it's a blind corner. So it's very hard to understand where you need to start cutting into this corner, right? So I'm going to rewind this, and I'll give you something what I'm looking at this moment. At this moment, once I get to this phase, I'm already pinpointing, you know, my peripheral is, I can see this line. Like I can gauge that distance. And when I'm doing that, I'm also just straight looking at this curbing, you know, the time when I need to actually turn. And how I can actually gauge that is, when do I suspect that curbing to appear on, you know, the side of this post here? That's when I would actually start timing turning into the corner more aggressively. And now I'm going to try clipping the left front on this curbing. Exit as straight as possible in first gear, not trying to add any wheel spin. Second gear, I stay in second gear here. This is probably one of the more difficult corners, honestly, in this track, right here. And it's just because you're really not straight line braking at all. Like, you got to do heavy braking to slow it down here, and then you really got to release in a short window to turn right down into this curbing to find your apex and hit your apex. So I'm in a rolling phase, partial throttle at the apex, and trying to hug this corner tight, straighten the exit there, and you really want to be pointed to this curbing. And why that's important off that right-hand curb we just did is to make sure we're straight line braking into turn 15. And you could do what you need. I'm braking before this curbing ends, the first set of curbing ends, and before I even reach this curbing here. So first gear now, and now I'm actually using as limited brake pressure as I can. Same approach as I had for turn 12, and just getting off the corner as straight as possible. Those two corners are unique, turn 15 and turn 12, but they have very similar qualities in how you need to attack your, angle to your apex and the blind section of it. So let this roll through, second gear, and I go the third, same quality before I actually set in here. And it's just to make sure I'm not ultimately abusing the rear tires and keeping the car under me. Now here, I like to cut this section quite heavily, and I'll do it slow-mo. I put the right front on the white line, and now I'm putting my methodical process is thinking, okay, let's get the left front as close to this curbing as possible and keep the car pointing. I don't want to put both fronts on this curbing because I don't really want to upset the front of the car for dynamic purposes. I want to keep the left front pointing because that's all the load of this corner is. It's all going to the left side. So I'm trying to shortcut this as much as possible so I can straighten this part out and cut this section as well. And much like you just seen, I'm trying to get the left front on this painted line so I can just get to my partial throttle and full throttle moment easier and more efficient. Now, if you want to use second in that section, go for it. I mean, if you just feel better doing it. But there's a compromising point to it. You may have a lot better trajectory here, say in the second gear, but it's harder to match the apex speed in the turn 19 and at the apex because of not adding a downshift. So I'm a third gear and I'm getting ready to downshift a second now and turning in. This is where I'm actually looking to hit this yellow curbing here. It's not too tall of a curbing. I'm partial throttle to keep the car consistent and balanced. Open the wheel up, and then I'm going to power the full throttle once I know I can make the exit without getting into this runoff. So this is another section that's very hard to pinpoint what's actual lane you want to use for braking, but also what gear you want to get down to for turn 20. If that is your first gear selection or second, I think the longer laps you do, the hotter the rear tires get, you want to utilize second for this section. But that is totally up to what you feel best with. Now you can also put half the car on this curbing and the braking, but right when we get to this little underpass, and I'll back it up so you can see this underpass right here, this sign of COTA, is when I start lifting and braking. You can see. And now I'm downshifting the first now, and I'm trying to get off this braking phase and cut that curbing as much as possible. And just power straight off the corner. So that's one of our efficient laps there. I'm going to go to lap 9, let it go and chase perspective so you can see. And after that, we'll just close the video out. Alright, everyone. That is some chase perspective laps, obviously, at COTA. That's it's gonna be a tough challenge nonetheless. You know, you're really just trying to battle driving a track. And this week you're not gonna have any pit stops to worry about, being the West layout that we're running. So I would just emphasize once again, focus on the corners that we laid out here, attacking the corners how you need to, and just driving the track, driving the car, and as some people say, racing the game. But yeah, just race your pace, attack the corners how we looked at it here in this video, and I promise good things will happen. Just let the car and come to you, make the car be efficient, don't overspeed your entries, balance the car into braking, and then find your points of releasing that brake so you can just have more consistent feeling to the car. Even if it's a snug feeling, it's okay. You know, you want to have some qualities where you can control the car more than it controlling you. So with that said, it's going to do it for me this week in COTA, and I hope to see you guys in our practice session Sunday. You guys have a good one.